Okay, better late than never. So, first I just want to say, Bob, thank you. That was really beautiful to witness, to receive the technicality, the passion. Um, watching and hearing about the technical aspects of your hands dancing on the piano, it felt very much like feet dancing on ice, skates dancing on ice. There's a lot of correlation there, a lot of similarities. And um, you mentioned some words in your teaching, and I would like to bring those into the way in which I'm going to approach this conversation around the mind, around presence. And words were used such as tension within the body, within the wrist, within the forearm, within the fingers, understanding the music. This is more of a relationship of understanding oneself. Uh, and how things lead from one aspect of the phrase to the next. And within that, as an athlete, as a performer, as a human being, there's a lot to work with within that in terms of how we maneuver our way through life's up and downs, and also through our relationship to performance, because inevitably there are always going to be ups and downs. Um, if someone has their microphone on, if you could just, okay, I'm unmuted now. Okay, so and really what this comes down to is a connection to really understanding oneself and having the willingness and the courage to look at what's there, deeper and deeper layers. As under pressure, all of those truths, all of those aspects, all of those behavioral patterns, all of those belief systems that we carry deep within our subconscious, they get triggered under pressure. And whether we allow ourselves to be aware of them in everyday life or not, under pressure, they tend to seep through the cracks. And so while Bob was talking about the aspect of addressing how we address the piano, it really spoke to me and ways in which I can weave these things together. So first I would like to invite you all to, if you feel comfortable, to close down your eyes and just take a moment to slow down. So find a comfortable position, close down your eyes, and bring your awareness into your breath as we just traversed a very intellectual lesson requiring a lot of brain power. Can we give ourselves permission to choose to let go and be here in this moment, feeling and experiencing the inflow and outflow of our breath without trying to control it in any way? Really experiencing the sensation of our belly and chest rising and falling with each breath. The air tickling your nostrils on the way in and on the way out. Can you feel your pulse within your body? And can you witness whatever thoughts may arise just as an observer? Can you feel the flow of life, the flow of each moment happening right now, and be completely one with it? And on your next inhale, breathing in deeply, filling your lungs all the way to the top and holding. Take one more sip, one more sip, and let out a sigh out your mouth. Ah, good. You can blink open your eyes again. Thank you for joining me in some breaths and slowing things down a bit. Often when we are working in a very technical manner, the mind goes fast because it's required. It's absolutely necessary. And the body can catch up. And what can happen, it can feel like we're running downhill, just waiting to trip ourselves and start tumbling. So this willingness, this choice, and this ability to come back to our breath, to come back to our presence, is a way of practicing slowing down. And while we may not be able to actively do that mid-performance, we can recognize when our body is asking that from ourselves, maybe throughout a practice day, throughout life. And within this practice, we are learning to attune to the messages that are coming within, from within, our own innate wisdom that is asking to be heard. There's a lot of information there that is often suppressed in a field where excellence is being strived for. Often those inner feelings, the emotions, the messages from the body, they get suppressed, they get pushed down because the goal, the egoic mind's idea of what needs to happen becomes paramount. And over time, this suppression can cause a shutting down of the self. And when speaking about something like the piano, which in many ways, especially through that lesson in witnessing that, is very similar to figure skating. Figure skating is a very technically demanding sport. There's a lot going on. There are a lot of things to be aware of. And while we may not skate for as long as a piano recital, we have many things to be aware of. And at the same time, we have to let go and perform from an authentic place. So we're not just getting through the piece and nailing all the notes, not just landing all the jumps and getting all the steps. There has to be something of ourselves that is shared, that is offered. And to be able to do that, we have to be able to understand who we are and how we want to express ourselves. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and talk a little bit about my career. Growing up as a figure skater, I definitely had some anxiety issues within competing. I would often try way too hard. I would get out on the ice to compete, and I would skate twice as fast and jump twice as high. And my coaches would be like, what's happening? What happened out there? It didn't look like the same person in practice. And it wasn't until actually my dad helped me find my kung fu teacher, Glenn Doyle, who worked with Elvis Stoico. And if you're familiar with the famous Canadian figure skater, he was known for his mental strength, his mental focus. He did it better than anyone else. And what kung fu brought me was this ability to lock into the present moment and to find my inner warrior. And what that inner warrior gave me was this ability to say, I can do this, no matter how difficult it may seem. And within that process of learning to find that inner warrior, I noticed all the ways in which my inner dialogue was doing the opposite. How often my inner dialogue, my inner critic, would be the prevailing voice. And so if you can imagine someone standing over your shoulder, whispering or yelling in your ear, don't mess this up. Oh, that part that's coming up that you always seem to struggle with is almost here, like you should probably tense up every muscle in your body and worry about it some more. We are now trying to do what we're trying to do while carrying a backpack full of bowling balls. We are adding to the stress. We are adding to the difficulty that we are experiencing. So what we want to do is to create a relationship with ourselves where we feel like we have our own back, where that inner voice feels like it champions us, where no matter what situation we are in, we feel safe because that relationship with the self is solid. So there were some questions on the intake surrounding going out on stage and how do you manage the lights? How do you manage the the crowd? How do you manage sitting in front of a different piano? Well, it's a lot harder to do when your inner critic is now pointing out all the obvious things that are going to make it harder and then adding to the anxiety. All of those things are obvious. They're right there in front of you. What would happen if in everyday life, in every moment that you're living, whether you're sitting in traffic and you're running behind, or you spill something in the kitchen or whatever, you manage to notice when these voices arise. So now the practice leaves the piano. For me, the practice left the ice rink, and it became a relationship of studentship in each moment of my life. So now I got to practice and gain mileage without necessarily putting mileage on my body. And that intimacy of learning to understand the way in which I work, the way in which these mechanisms were aiding me or doing the opposite, how they were affecting my experience. And then on top of that, was I even enjoying it, or was I just trying to survive my mind? So this inquiry into how do I be with myself becomes the first question that we can ask ourselves in each moment, whether we're practicing at the piano or whether we're living our everyday lives away from the piano. Another thing I did as an athlete is called biofeedback. And so I worked with a neurologist where she would hook me up to a computer with all these different electrodes, and we would work on the different areas of the brain. And my respiration rate, my heart rate, my temperature, and all of these things would go through this software system and give me feedback as to how well I was focusing, how hard I was trying, how much I was judging myself. And it was very fascinating because we would play my music, and I would do a visualization, and she could see how deep my visualization was and if I was pushing or trying too hard. So what this gave me, while not everyone has access to that, what this gave me was this understanding that we can practice through visualization. This is not a new thing. Science has shown that 80% of the neural pathways in our body receive the same messaging as if we're physically doing it, if we're in a deep visualization state. So this becomes another opportunity to practice. How can we step into that practice with the kind of mindset that we want to carry when we're at the piano? So now this is another opportunity to practice and to witness, right? And through witnessing this way of practicing, we also have this opportunity to step into the awareness of our relationship with perfection. When we address something that we are working on that's new, maybe not even new. Yeah, because sometimes when it's not new, we carry the expectation that it should have been fixed already because our mind has this idea of, okay, it's been enough time, so therefore I know it should be better by now. This relationship of perfection offers us this way of relating to the process that doesn't instill trust or faith in the process. So in figure skating, it's not quite like piano. We have a much shorter window within our career. So there is that added kind of uh, urgency to get things done. Um, but even without that urgency of the physical progress of aging, being at the piano, there's the egoic mind's desire and need for something to be quote unquote right by a certain time. Why? And this is a question we can all ask ourselves in layers. Why? Why does this need to be done now in this way? Do I actually know that it needs to be done now? Do I know that it needs to be done in this way by now? What could be available for me as a new expansion of my awareness of self, of my relationship, of how I relate to myself and my mind, understanding my mind, if I go through this process with trust, with faith, and with an ability to slow down, right? What happens if we allow ourselves to slow down? What we'll often find, as Bob was talking about with the softness within the hand, is that we soften physically when we soften emotionally and mentally. And when we soften, we create more room for fluidity. And within that fluidity, energy moves. So if you look at our bodies and you look at all life, everything is energy. In skating, by the midway point of our long program, our heart rate is usually between 170 and 180. 3/4 of the way in can be up to 190. And we're trying to do all these fine-tune, intricate things, and we have to somehow find a way to, while our legs feel like lead, still feel soft in some capacity. So when we're faced with the aspects of life that make us contract, that have us react instead of respond, what can we do to stretch that time between the events and our reaction to give us a moment to become a witness and then a responder as opposed to a reactor? So how does that apply to the piano? You're playing a piece and something happens and your go-to reaction is to scold yourself and tense up. You're now tripping downhill until you can catch your breath. You don't really have time to do that. What if you are able to just give yourself a pause? And I don't mean stop, but give yourself a pause, like a microsecond within the mind where there's this, I've been here before because I practice this in my everyday life. I'm okay. I'm safe. This is just happening. What that does is it now creates the freedom to start anew in each moment, right? If you look at a piano piece as one huge chunk, that's extremely overwhelming. If you look at a piano piece as this period of time where you're present and expressing, it now becomes a journey. What would happen if that journey, the outcome and the perceived result of that journey is only judged by you? How can we create that? How can we create that relationship with our perceived awareness of what is a success or not? Right? Of course, there are critics, there are judges, there are competitions, there are all these things, but at the end of the day, I believe it really comes down to, why are we doing this? What is this giving me? Am I doing this for the same reason that I started doing it for? Am I doing this to express myself? Am I honoring this beautiful gift of having another language, an instrument that I can express my soul with? And the most important aspect of that is my relationship to that. And some might say, yes, but there's all these things I have to accomplish. That is true. But you're far more likely to accomplish those things if the primary reason is related to your relationship to it. It's not about not addressing the elephant in the room. It's about addressing the elephant in the room, but still choosing how you want to experience this thing. So when I arrived at the Olympics, I had a really bad infection in both of my feet. I couldn't even put my feet in my skates. I had to get injections of freezing into the top and bottom of my feet for 2 weeks straight, to the point that I couldn't walk. And I remember telling the doctor, "You'll have to cut off my pinky toes. I'm going out there and I'm skating." That was the mentality that I lived with then. But I really was fortunate in the sense that I went to the Olympics at the age of 29, and I had lived a lot of life and I learned from a lot of people. And what I noticed looking around me at the Olympic Games, where for many people, it feels like life and death, very similar to the kind of anxiety that one might feel if they're being chased by a tiger. That reality was very present everywhere, and people were feeding it. There's an ancient indigenous story. There are two wolves, um, and the one that prevails is the one you feed, in a nutshell. And so I witnessed a lot of people feeding that story that I have worked this hard for this long, I've spent this much money, I've dedicated my whole life, and so therefore it needs to go this way. And I watched the the weight on their shoulders get heavier and heavier and heavier. And I had this moment of going, oh, wow, I get to choose. I get to choose what kind of experience this is for me. And I decided I was going to experience it with joy and with gratitude. And I ended up having some of the best skates of my life in that moment. Not be, I mean, of course, preparation, as Bob was saying, preparation is absolutely essential. All of these things, I worked endless hours and with all my heart and soul to be prepared. But in that moment, I easily could have thrown it all away by feeding the wrong wolf. So what really it came down to was, what wolf do I want to feed? What experience do I want to have? And how will that create the opportunity for me to perform from a place of freedom, to really tune into what is happening here and now. And what's happening here and now is the same that happens every single day. I'm on a ice surface. I have my partner beside me. They're pressing play on a piece of music that I've heard way too many times, and I'm going to do my thing. And that's a choice that we get to make. And so what I want to offer is, how can we practice in a way that prepares our mind for that kind of experience as well? Right? So maybe we don't get the opportunity to go and practice in the auditorium and on that piano underneath the lights in front of an audience very often. But we can put ourselves in the mental state, in the awareness as if they're there, and practice from this place so that the discomfort becomes home. That we know ourselves so well in these states, in these environments, in these sensations, that when they arrive, we welcome them. It's like, oh, thank you, nerves. Thank you, sweaty palms. Thank you, elevated heart rate. Thank you, rapid breathing. We're all here. Let's sit down, let's collect, let's get together, and let's embrace this. So that becomes a choice. So one tool I'd like to offer, I mean, this is like something that could be stretched out over weeks of talking. And so I'm trying to condense as much as I can into a short amount of time, and then offer some tangible tools to be used. One thing that I offer to that I actually offered to Bob, and also I work with young athletes, is called a squeegee technique that I came up with. So I invite you all to close your eyes. Just tune into your breath. And now bring yourself to a time where you felt out of your center, out of alignment, agitated, nervous, stressed, berating yourself, frustrated. Feel those sensations. And if you can remember that time and the details, think of those thoughts and allow them to be present, so you've placed yourself back in that space. Now imagine you're looking through a window, and all of those sensations, those emotions, and those thoughts are like dirt splatters on a window. Now, in your mind, with a lot of calmness, you're going to breathe in and imagine you're lifting a big squeegee. And as you exhale, you're going to slowly and methodically drag the squeegee down the window. Continuing to inhale, lift the squeegee, and exhale, lower the squeegee as you work your way along the window, cleaning it. Very simple. And keep going until it's clean. Allowing yourself to let those things fall to the ground. Giving yourself permission to let them go. Those things you're attached to. Can you find the strength to surrender and let them go? Good. Now open your eyes. It's a very simple, very quick technique that I like to offer people who are about to step onto the ice for a competition, about to step on stage, or maybe they just had a fight with a family member. It doesn't really matter. All of these situations offer an opportunity to practice letting go. This is another muscle. And unfortunately, we carry this muscle with a lot of tension, most of us. And that tension creates a lot of exhaustion and it creates a lot of stiffness and a lack of malleability and agility within ourselves. So the more we can practice just softening and letting go, the freer we are to be. Now, the next thing I would like to offer is this idea of sacredness. And Bob and I did this exercise and it just kind of intuitively flowed through me. I invited Bob to sit at the piano. So if you are beside your piano, in front of your piano, I invite you to sit there. And if you're not in front of your piano, you can imagine and turn and face your piano. And just take a moment to connect with your piano. Just be present with it. Can you start to see this piano as more than just this thing that you slave away at, this object? In many indigenous philosophies, they see the world through the lens of animism. And animism gives way to this idea that everything is alive, everything has a spirit, and therefore everything can teach us something. And that gives us the opportunity to learn a depth of relationship. How do we relate to ourselves and everything around us? So, can the piano become a mirror? How do we treat the piano? How do we address the piano? Do we acknowledge the piano? Do we acknowledge ourselves before even pressing one key? Do we ever say thank you to it? You gently place your fingers on the keys and just feel the energy of the keys. How much potential energy lies in the piano? An infinite amount of beauty just below your fingertips, just waiting for you to become a vessel for it to express itself. What would it feel like if you were able to connect with your piano like this more often? Maybe ask it permission before you begin, like you would an intimate partner. And when you feel connected and you feel united with your piano, I invite you to play. Nothing planned, no goal, just a reciprocal relationship of feeling each other. Good. Thank you for going on that journey with me. If anyone would like to share how that felt for them, you're welcome to, Bob, if you can just, if they're able to unmute themselves. If anyone would like to share what that felt like to connect with their piano and what flowed through them, would love to hear from you. Okay. Bob, do you want to share what it felt like the first time we did that together?
Sure. So for me, I actually had never considered thanking the piano for what it's afforded me. And I really got in that moment, there is there is a bond between that takes two things. It takes the piano, takes me, but it also takes the piano. And there was a feeling of ease and calmness that I sometimes experience, but not always. So there was an access to something.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. You know, where this came from for me is as a figure skater, I was a pair skater. And when we would step out on the ice and we were waiting for the announcer to call our names, and we were going to go and take our starting position, um, my partner and I would always, grab each other's hand and give it a squeeze and look at each other in the eye. And that moment of uniting created a camaraderie, and it created an understanding of like we're in this together. And so being out there on the stage with the piano alone can seem daunting. And while it may seem funny to say you're not alone up there, you're with a piano, that's true if you believe it to be true. And this is a really interesting aspect of how the mind works, is that we create our own reality based on the thoughts we choose to feed, the energy we put into. And within that exploration, we receive reflections on where our resistances lie, on where our tightness, where our stiffness might lie. And that may come out in the way we express ourselves musically, because that expression is unique. That essence that makes the way you play it come from you needs to flow from this place of being safe within, to be able to explore and expand and um yeah, create new relationship with things. And so by doing this with the piano, you offer yourself an opportunity to stretch outside the comfort zone, to stretch outside the normal way of thinking. And maybe there's something in there. It's less about the direct relationship that it might give you, it's more about the learning to explore. I truly believe that everything comes down to studentship. How are we showing up as a student? And if we connect gratitude to it, it always opens up into joy. And joy always opens up into more freedom. And freedom opens up into expression. So by stepping into this creative way of accessing gratitude and accessing exploration, it becomes more fun. And you also start to see and feel and become aware of different nuances that maybe you weren't aware of before. So I think I'm gonna wrap it up there. I bounced around quite a bit. But I guess I really want to leave you with, be very clear what your why is. It will get you through the hardest times. It will remind you how to reconnect with the purity of the instrument and your relationship to it. And then use all aspects of everyday life as an opportunity to practice becoming the kind of performer and person you want to be, because they are not separate. And so in that practice, you work the neural pathway, the neural plasticity that's available. You create the highway of behavioral patterns that will serve you when you have a microsecond to respond. So all of that will be available to you because you become a student of yourself. Thank you.
Are there any questions? We have a few minutes, about 5 minutes, to address any questions? I think there's a reaction. You can raise your hand actually on this thing.
Brian.
Hi there. How are you?
Brian, see,
Hi there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Cool. So I'm sure, well, I certainly did and found, I'm sure others have found. So a lot of the things that you were talking about are certainly explored in meditative techniques. Um, and I was curious if you had any specific avenues of meditation that were helpful for you, or something that, in addition to what you provided us with, would be, a small daily practice that would encourage the kind of development you're talking about.
Yeah, thank you. It's a good question. Um, yeah, I mean, there are many different forms of meditation. I am consistently exploring myself. I'm actually right now in Peru in the Amazon, continuing my own studies with different indigenous tribes and the exploration of self. Um, One of my mentors, who's a devout Buddhist, says that the best way to start is to sit in silence for 10 minutes minimum every day, without any goal, without any technique, just be with yourself and witness. And that's a great place to start. Have a journal and just start to explore what it feels like to be present with your thoughts. Um, and then beyond that, there's so many resources online of good mindfulness meditations. Mindfulness is a great way to simply bring yourself into the present moment. There are many different types of meditation, transcendental. You can go into, transformational breath work, which is like taking things into a more intense realm. Um, but really, it's as simple as being present and breathing. And if your mind starts to wander, instead of seeing that as a failure, just bringing it back to the breath, observing and bringing it back to the breath. And you can gain so much just in that practice of witness consciousness and being still. I would say that's a great place to start. And if you feel inspired, yeah, like as an athlete, we studied dance, we studied Pilates, I studied martial arts. Like expand, cross train. Go to some yoga classes, go to different meditation classes, go to sound healing classes. Really find different ways that different philosophies have found to become in tune with stillness.
Thank you. Helpful.
Thank you, Lisa.
Hi. I do have a question. Um, I'm not to the level where I'm performing in front of a group, but even with my teacher or someone,
Mhm.
sometimes you get going and it goes well, and you get in your head, and then you get one little mistake, and it's like, how do you regain your cool?
Mm,
Basically, do you have any techniques to? Because I'm sure I'm a big fan of figure skating, and I know that sometimes if you miss a jump or a throw or something early, it's hard to
yeah.
get your original momentum back.
Yeah,
Thanks.
absolutely. And thank you for your question. I think it doesn't really matter if it's sitting in front of your teacher or sitting in front of thousands of people, it's all perspective. If you feel an intense fear of failure, that's real. So, there's a psychological, philosophical view of how much am I feeding my fear of failure and what does that even mean? External validation, other
Mhm.
people's opinions. Can I give myself permission to let go of those things and just be in process? When I finished skating, I went into acting for a number of years, and my acting teacher said, you don't need to be in the perfect place. Wherever you are in that day, just show up and be from that place. So it's really giving yourself permission to be human and to be real and to be raw. And within that, you create freedom. Now, while you're in the midst of that challenge, breathe. If you need to, stand up, shake your hands, move the energy, If I got frustrated, I would drop down and do some push-ups, whatever you need to do to move the energy out of your head into your body. The body has a lot of innate wisdom and knowledge on how to redirect stuck energy. So you can try that, if you're in your lesson, you can, and you feel like you're getting worked up, you can ask your teacher, can I take a moment to reset? And you'll have a much easier time coming back into presence in that way.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Charisse.
Hi. Um,
Hi.
First of all, I'm Lisa's teacher, so she can definitely take a moment to reset. Um, and I think this is maybe more of a Bob specific question.
Mhm.
I've found in my own playing, when I was a kid, I found like big jumps to be terrifying because I didn't get my hands on the keys before I actually played them. It was kind of a free for all, and that's helped me a lot. But relative to what you called enslavement to notation, how do I know when I should strictly follow the music and when I should try to be creative and figure out my own way to um, make it more? Is it just a comfort thing, or are you just doing that all the time? Do you try to stick to the music, and when do you decide to go your own way?
It's a great question, Charisse. And I will say this, it is astounding how intelligent our bodies are. And they give us immediate and actually very true feedback. And it's relatively simple. And this really comes from Taubman, which she said, there should be no moment that's difficult. All you're dealing with is something that is unfamiliar. So when you have the way to fill in that gap, to do something in a familiar that is unfamiliar, suddenly you feel something better by the instruction, your body retains that experience. That also gives the body the opportunity to then evaluate against other situations like situations. So if you listen to your body's going to tell you, even though the music says that note should be connected to that note, my body tells me I can't do that easily. And that's where the creative element has to come in. Voicing, the shaping, all of the pedaling, all other aspects have to come in, because if we are uncomfortable, there is no will in the world that's going to change that scenario. We have to actually change the way we do it.
Thank you.
Okay. I want to really thank Dylan for his generosity, his wisdom, his leadership. It's been an amazing personal experience and professional experience to work collaboratively with him on this project, and I just thank him really from the bottom of my heart. So Dylan, thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you, Bob. Thank you for, inviting me to do this with you. Thank you everyone for being here. It's truly an honor. I'm very humbled, continually exploring what this even means to understand the mind and the self and how it pertains to these different realms of expression. And so this is a really beautiful exploration to be on, and with all of you as well. And one thing I did want to share that I forgot to mention is um, in some of the questions that were written online, one person asked about flow state and how to practice being in flow state. And flow state is within sports psychology is where you're in your peak flow, where you're in this out of body experience. Um, and I think the simplest way I could explain that is to really have an intention and give it your attention, to really be zoned in to what is happening and to be fully present with it, and then to let yourself go into that. And so really the piano becomes a practice of life, and life becomes a practice of the piano, and all of these ways you will, each and every one of us, find our own way to connect to these things. And so yeah, continue to find the reflections and everything.
Thank you, Dylan. And if people were interested in contacting you, what's the best way to contact you?
Just the bat signal into the sky is usually what does it.
I see.
Yeah, you can send me an email at dylan.moscovitch@outlook.com or dylandmoscovitch at gmail.com. And my last name is spelled Moscovitch, and it's Dylan.
And
But
I'll
all
send
of my
some of,
info is on the flyer.
yeah, I'll send it again with the recording. Great. Thank you everyone for participating. It's been truly wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Bye bye.